I would have, at the time when interest rates were low, I likely would have just kept buying more real estate.
Today, I'm super excited to be here with my friend Vinci Sevilla. He's the founder and CEO at Getaway Haus. They have more than 150 properties on their management. This guy is also a real estate investor. He is also a leader in this space. He's got his own coaching program as well.
I bought my first short-term rental and went live June 2021 now, and we have grown up to more than 150 plus short-term rental.
When you look at buying an asset, what do you look at differently now versus when you first started?
I would say definitely looking at the size of the company, how much revenue are they bringing in. But if they're not making more than like 250 in net revenue, then at that point you're just buying it based off of the contract itself. So the asset is the contract.
What does hacking your W2 mean to you?
I would say for those who are listening, start out by reading The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I know a lot of people out there who are working their W2, they spend a lot of time just wasting time, to be honest.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and where we aim to bring together entrepreneurs, real estate investors, founders, leaders, operators in the vacation rental and hospitality space so they can tell us about their stories, the lessons that they have learned along the way, as well as maybe some of the mistakes they might have made along the way so we don't have to make those same mistakes ourselves. Today, I'm super excited to be here with my friend Vinci Sevilla. Very excited for the conversation. He's the founder and CEO at Getaway Haus. So not only are they property management operation, they have more than 150 properties on their management, but this guy is also a real estate investor. He is also a leader in this space. He's got his own coaching program as well. And more surprisingly, he does this all while still having a W-2 job full time, which we need to understand how he does. So that's some of the things we're going to be getting into today is how to navigate through rapid growth, how to hack your W-2 to be able to build a business while still keeping the, full-time job, on the side as well. How do you go from co-hosting to investing to all of a sudden, being involved in the development of large campground resorts, joint ventures, all sorts of things here that we're going to get into. So super excited for this conversation. But before we go through all of that, Vinci, if I may start with this, which I always like to start with, you've been doing this for quite a while now. So it's been a rapid growth journey for you. If you were to start all over again, all right, and you could either do something differently or give your earlier self some piece of advice based on what you know today, what would you do differently, or what would you advise yourself, to do or consider, based on what you know today, if you were to start all over again?
Oh man. I would say, I mean, everything's hindsight 2020, right? There's so many things that, if you had known what the future would look like, you could have probably made a couple of different decisions. Um, but first of all, again, thank you for bringing me on this podcast here. I'm happy to talk to you and talk to your audience here about everything and anything you just mentioned. Um, I think the biggest takeaway really is I probably would have, at the time when interest rates were low, which isn't really that long ago, right? Um, I likely would have just kept buying more real estate. Yeah, and not hesitating to wait until, I don't know, I get a slam dunk deal or anything like that. If hindsight looking back, I probably would have tried to buy more real estate and more cash flowing assets. A lot of
And do
people
you
may
think?
not think that way,
Mhm.
but yeah, I
do you,
definitely
do,
wanted
do-
to do that.
I feel like looking backwards, that's always, that times were always better, before. And so is it something that you think applies today as well? Because of course it's a completely different environment. Interest rates are higher. The Airbnb boom, is over, so to speak. We're back to a world where you have to do a good job to be able to be to cash flow as a short-term rental host and operator. But do you think people are gonna look back and say, this times that looked so hard, today, oh, I wish I had bought more. I wish I had, not been so conservative. Or do you think it was just something that like applied for the timing of when you started?
I think yes and no. I think that there are ways to still buy properties, yes, today, in order to garner even the same type of returns you probably wanted to see for 3 or 4 years ago, back in 2020, 2021, right? It is harder, though, today to do so, to get those numbers or to see that kind of return. Because interest rates are higher, because there's a lot more red tape, because of all that, but it is possible because I have friends and students who are still crushing it and still buying some of these great properties um, today, and they're making great returns already. And so definitely doable. Now, at the scale I wanted to grow, I've already grown really fast, and we really started. I bought my first short-term rental and went live June 2021. It's 2025 now, and yeah, we have grown up to 100, more than 150 plus short-term rental listings, and so um, we've grown really fast. But that's again hindsight 2020. And I think there's a couple of things that people probably would have done maybe differently. Knowing myself, I would have kept looking for deals or maybe better partnerships, or more partnerships in order to amass more properties. Yeah.
So when you say you wish you had bought more properties, how many did you buy, during that period? Like, you started with one, um, you know.
Yeah, I was probably doing since 2021. Um, Man, we did two that first year, 2021, and then every year after that, we probably bought another two, three, or four every year since.
So
Yeah.
so again,
Mhm.
looking back, you're like, oh man, I wish I had bought more, but there's a
Yeah.
reason why you didn't buy more. What
Yeah.
was your thinking at that moment of going at the pace that you were going and not faster?
Yeah. So I guess I should probably clarify also what I mean by buying more. Um, it's not just about buying like the number of units or buying like just single family homes. Actually, what I really mean by buying more is buying commercial hospitality.
Hmm.
Wishing I got into that quicker than I did. So yeah, that is a big caveat there. I probably should rectify. Um, there are single family homes that you can short term rental. The reason why we've grown so much in the short amount of time that we have was because uh, we began going and partnering up um, with people on bigger commercial properties. So hotels, campground resorts, a ranch, and that's what catapulted our growth. And
Hmm.
um, I had I wish we could have gone back and bought more of those type of properties
Hmm.
earlier on.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
again,
And
we also learned a lot
yeah,
from it.
of course.
Yeah,
And just to touch on that difference, between buying residential, buying commercial, of course. One of the bigger things is how you evaluate the asset, right? On the residential side, you'll evaluate it based on comparables, and it is what it is. On the commercial side, it's based on the income, so you have the
NOI,
opportunity
yep.
to,
Cap rate.
increase the net operating income, and based on a cap rate,
Mhm.
have a higher valuation. But correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that the challenge with commercial is that you need to, have more capital, because there tends to be less uh, financing available, or at least that's the case, where I live. Tell me about the setup there. Like, how was that transition from going from residential, investments in short-term rentals to commercial? What were some of the things that you were expecting, but maybe some that you were not expecting, in terms of similarities but also differences, and what you've learned in going from residential to commercial there?
Absolutely. So typically, when you're buying a single family home, there are multiple ways to buy a single family home, especially for short term rentals. Right, a lot of lenders out there, have products that can help you buy properties even at 10% down, like vacation home loan or second home loan is what they usually call it. And so we were doing that and buying, properties 10% down, utilizing our own income DTI. There are other ways where, let's say that, I have friends who, let's say, don't make enough or don't have that DTI ratio, so they use DSCR, right, like a debt service. Um,
Coverage ratio, yeah.
Exactly. And so that essentially utilizes the property's potential income to help you qualify for the loan, which is really great, a great product. And so people utilizing DSCRs, conventional loans, second home loans, even business statement type of loans. Um, and I know there's a lot of creative ways to do so nowadays out there, creative financing, sub two, etc. So these are all typical strategies that somebody would utilize in order to buy a single family short-term rental residential property. When you get into commercial, the purchase price are typically, for most of them, usually bigger, right? You're buying the land. Let's say that you want to develop on it. Maybe you get a commercial loan. Um, but you have all these things that you want to do. You got to go through entitlement. You have to go through easements. You have to make sure you got utilities in there. It costs a lot more. You got to get through engineering if you need to, septic if you're not connected to city water, sewer, trash, or whatever. So there's a lot of things that you have to kind of go through and do. So I'm kind of just generalizing it here for everyone. Typically, uh, some people go the route of purchasing, let's say, a hotel or a commercial property through, I've seen two of the most popular ways. One, they buy it through by raising money, right? So they open up a, let's say, a 506B or a 506C, right, in order to go ahead and raise funds for it. That's essentially a syndication, right? And the 506B and the 506C are the different types of syndications you can utilize in order to raise funds to not just purchase the property, but you also want to raise enough funds to also rehab it and get it up to um, your expectations. So that's
Hmm.
one of the common ways I've seen people buy hotels or campgrounds. The second common way that I've seen people buy these is through an SBA loan, and that's a small business loan that essentially you can utilize by maybe doing 20-25% down on that SBA loan. It's essentially a government backed or government funded loan, which you have to give them your business plan, all of your business ideas and business proposals and whatnot, and they have to underwrite it, of course, and all that, and then give you an SBA loan up to a certain amount. And a lot of people also put in all the costs for rehabbing and operating and purchasing the property into that SBA loan. So I find that those are some of the two common ways that people have utilized to buy commercial property, and I've done both.
Hmm.
Um, Let me pause right here.
Yeah,
Any
no, for
questions about
sure.
that one?
That's interesting. And so you've done both. So is it fair to assume? I mean, from what you just said there, like residentially, you can buy with 10% down. With the SBA loan, you're looking at 20 to 25% down. But not only that, like you also on the other alternative need to be looking at a syndication and raising funds and whatnot. So it is more capital intensive
It is.
to, plus the purchase prices are higher to do commercial,
Mhm.
but the upside is also greater, right? Since you can
Yes,
since you can drive that property value based on the revenue
exactly,
optimization and cost
exactly.
optimization. So how do you break through that barrier that comes from the additional, again, barriers of entry that you have as far as getting into commercial? Because it's great in terms of the upside that you get, but as
Right.
someone that's maybe more of a residential investor that is just looking at the traditional way of buying property, is listening to all of this and is like, man, that sounds like crazy stuff. Like, how did you break through that? and
Mm.
get into commercial?
I think understanding that the way you value an asset, a commercial asset versus a residential asset, was the biggest difference for me, right? Where my residential asset, you could be making 100,000 a year on a single family home on a short term rental, but when you come to sell it, you can't sell what you've created there, right? When you're trying to sell just the asset itself, um, it's based off of the comparables, unfortunately, right? But now when you're talking about commercial properties and you have multiple sources of revenue and income coming into the commercial property, that raises your net operating income, right? And based off of the cap rate, you can you can exit or sell that property for a much higher amount. And so that's what I love being able to do, and being able to control um, the asset value by providing extra sources of income. So let me give an example on that. Um, on a commercial property, like one of our campground resorts, we have lodging on there. We have cabins, we have airstreams, we have a lot of really cool, unique stays on there that we have. However, we also have food and beverage. We have F&B, so we have 5 to 7 restaurants on site that were newly built for this campground resort. We also have activities. So we rent out pontoon boats, kayaks, activities, face painting, you name it. Okay, and we also um, uh, rent out venues within the campground for weddings and corporate events. And so you have four main sources of revenue there. You have your lodging, your activities, your your venues and events, and then your F&B, food and beverage. And so all of that comes into play because you can utilize that in a commercial property, and that just raises your net operating income, which in turn again raises the value of your property.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's, I feel like, what really broke the barrier for me, understanding the difference between the two. And I think for a lot of your listeners who want to get into the space, first understand that, like, as you know, when you're getting into any asset, you want to underwrite it, right? And so the underwriting analysis is a key part of this entire play. And so when you're underwriting for your residential, your commercial, you want to make sure you plug in all those numbers and see, at the end what you're actually returning and making.
Hmm. So let's understand the timeline of Vinci getting into this space. The first thing I want to understand is, so you, again, you still have your W-2. So let's start there just for a second. So
Yeah,
what is it like? You're an engineer. Um, what just briefly, like, how long have you been doing that for? But more importantly, why did you decide to build everything that you're building while keeping that and not letting go of that?
got it. So, so first of all, my W-2, yeah, I've been working since I graduated college, and I've been with this company in particular uh, for the past decade, over a decade now, about 12 years, and so it's a great company, um, you know, great Fortune 50, company, been around for a long time, and I love what I do with them, and I have always been an opportunist. Opportunist, am I saying that right? Where I believe that, hey, you know what? If I can figure out a way to be able to do both and still create my business and still live my dreams out, while being able to do this, then why not? Um, so it's really all about time management and managing your expectations as well. And so I have become really good at time management. And so utilizing the specific times I have for my W-2, and being able to hack my W-2 has been a key way for me to be able to also utilize that time to build out my business connections, networking, etc. So that's the
What does hacking your
yeah.
W-2 mean to you?
Um, I would say for those who are listening, start out by reading the 4 Hour Work Week. by
Mm-hmm.
Tim Ferriss. I think it's a great book to showcase how to really um, define your time and optimize your time and your day. And so
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people out there who are working their W-2, they spend a lot of time just wasting time, to be honest. And how much work do you really get done within that 40-hour work week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I can definitely tell you that um, I definitely get more done within 4 hours than somebody working a full 40-hour work week. Let's say in an office or whatever. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is really what how I've been able to optimize and hack my work to be able to really be able to juggle all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the hacking part is being able to figure out, okay, 80-20 rule, right? Uh, Focus on the 20% of the tasks that generate the 80% of your results,
Mm-hmm.
right? Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Eighty
Pareto
twenty rule,
Pareto
Pareto
principle.
principle, right? So like, if you focus on your W-2, what are the 20%? What's the 80%? What's the 20% of the things that you do that actually produce 80% of the results? And so I started off with that and say, okay, hey, the big things that's on my to-do list and what I need to do, let me find a way to work on those and hyper focus on it. Like I have a timer set up. I'll be working at tasks, and I literally, you should see my calendar. My calendar is literally split into specific tasks where, like, hey, I'm doing just this during this time frame. For the next 15 minutes, I'm working on that task. For the next 20 minutes, I'm working on this task, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like in the zone, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so yeah, I'm pretty strict about my specific time frames and my availability as well, which is really difficult. I also have two young kids. I
That's
have
what
a
I was gonna
3 year old
say, man. I
and a
was
1 year
gonna
old,
say.
right? Which is crazy enough as it is, and they may be busting through this door any moment as we speak. By the way, so apologize in advance. But having a 3 year old and a 1 year old right now is a lot to deal with.
Uh-huh.
As you can imagine, we've been building this business for the past 4 years. My daughter's about to turn 4 next month, so we literally started our short term rental business when my wife was 5 months pregnant. You know, and so having to kind of like navigate and juggle all that is not was not easy. I call it
Mhm.
newborn business. You got a newborn, you got a new business, newborn business. I mean, it is nuts being that phase. Yeah.
So the
Um.
timeline there. So
Anyway.
so okay. So you start thinking, okay, what's the 20% of the efforts that produce 80% of the results? You start thinking about where you spend your time to be more efficient, and then you start doing, I mean, and then you have a baby, and and then on the side, you start doing the real estate stuff. In terms of the timeline, you started with a residential property you bought. Help me understand, how do you go from the just ownership of residential property to the co-hosting slash property management, and then your involvement into all of this commercial stuff as well? Because I'm trying to understand how you see all of these kind of like interrelate with each other, because I'm trying to understand, do you see the property management as just a cash flow thing that funds your real estate investments? Do you see it as just a way to develop connections so that you can do joint ventures or syndications, because what you're actually after is like having a piece of a larger pie in terms of a deal? Because you have all of these different things, all of these
Yeah.
different models and different projects: residential, commercial, hotel, campgrounds. And I'm just trying to understand in your head, what's the master mind behind all of that, but also how it came together, sequentially. What came first? What came later? So if we go back to the timeline, you buy this first property. How does that
Yeah.
evolve into the rest?
Okay. So June 2021, we buy this first property. The next month we go live on our second property, and these are two different markets. Um, we just really liked the model, and we began really honing down on this whole Airbnb stuff.
So far you own.
Um,
So far these are two properties you've bought. Normally
Two
residentially,
properties.
that's it. you've bought.
exactly. So June
No management yet.
2021, July 2021, no management yet. And then
Okay.
my daughter was born September 2021. And I'm like, okay, while it'll be fun to go out there and try to look again and buy again, we got our firstborn. We have our daughter. It takes a lot of time to, and you're also like lack of sleep. Like when I say lack of sleep, I'm like I'm underserving it. Lack of like you'd be lucky to get 3 hours of sleep. I'm happy if I get 3 hours of sleep straight, right? So anyway, at that time, wanted to slow things down a little bit. However, I began posting on social media the things I was doing for the past couple months, and so around November 2021, a month or two after my daughter was born, I'm on paternity leave, and someone reaches out to me on social media and is like, "Hey, um, I just bought a property in this market and I want to learn more about this Airbnb stuff. Can you help me? I don't have time to, you know, do this Airbnb stuff like you, Vinci, but I work in healthcare and I'm really busy. Can you help me figure this out?" And I'm like, and that's when I stumbled into co-hosting, and that was my first co-hosting. I didn't even realize it was called co-hosting back then. I just thought, hey, we're just going to manage this property for this person who found me on social media, right? And I'm going to go ahead and manage it for them. And that was December 2021. So within the June to December, that 6 7 month time frame, that was three properties right there that we ended up under our umbrella of, let's say, Getaway House. Okay. Now the following year, 2022, I'm like, you know what? Hey, this co-hosting thing is actually pretty cool. You know, it's a low barrier of entry in terms of buying the property or having a property. You get to manage it. Yeah, you don't get to keep all the profits, but you keep it for a percentage. And I plug it into my existing systems already that I currently have. And so I'm like, you know what? This is not too bad. Um, I like this model, but I really want to buy more. Okay. So 2022, I bought two more properties, but we onboarded six more co-hosting clients, and that was just from word of mouth. We haven't, to this day, I haven't done really any marketing for my co-hosting at all. All of this has been kind of just word of mouth and from networking, to be honest. And so that's kind of like what catapulted us into building a brand, Getaway House, our company, into a portfolio that manages not just our own properties that my wife and I own, but also our clients now. And so we kind of just kept going from there. By the end of 2022, we were at, um, I would say around, I think about like 7 8 properties. And then 2023 came around. In 2023, um, we bought another one or two, and then we kept co-hosting maybe a few more. I believe by the end of 2023, we were at 12. Okay, which seems like, hey, steady growth from there, right? So December 2023, no, November 2023, we were at 12, and then I got contacted for a commercial property. Say, hey, we like what you've been doing, and we want to implement what you've been doing at our new campground. And I'm like, let's do it. And so we went from 12 to 24 within a month. And then that was December 2023. And then I got more clients, a few more single family clients. And then I got another commercial client around February of 2024. And we jumped from 24 to 74 by in the next 3 months. And
Hmm.
and then from
So
70.
really, so it comes down to like at that, so far, it's really like the transition was all about, clients that have multiple units. Clients, or one client doesn't represent one extra property. One client represents
Exactly.
multiple properties for you. So in the case of the campground, that's, of course, the first one you did. The second one was that also a campground? The
Yes,
second commercial one.
it was a ranch. It was a 550-acre ranch. Yep.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It has
mm-hmm.
22 hotels and then 27 other accommodations. So yeah, it was another big commercial property.
And
Yep.
so far, it's still, for the commercial side of things, it's still management. How do you get involved in the ownership side of things on the commercial side? Because so far, everything you've mentioned is like you've bought this residential properties, two at a time. Then you
Right.
started managing, residential. Then you start managing commercial. This opens up your eyes to the opportunity. When or how do you get involved into ownership of commercial property as well?
So for the ownership part, that's really more of a based off of the contract that you have. So we realized, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, what we're providing now is more than just it's more than just a co-hosting contract. This is now coming into talking about equity stake, right, and profit splits. And so that wasn't actually done until we got into that second commercial property and realized, you know what, we can actually come in here with a deal to have that kind of equity and a profit split outside of the contract between my company and the managing and operating the resort itself.
Hmm.
And so that was a very customized approach. And so not a lot of people talk about that, but that was something that um we had kind of worked out with the owner. And so yeah,
Is this
it's
something you've
definitely a
seen
lot
other
different than a
owners
regular
be
co-hosting
open to?
contract.
Is it something you've seen other owners be open to, like in terms of
Yes, yes, they
yeah?
are. Some of them who are, like, for example, willing to sell, right? And let's say that you don't have the capital or want to de-risk yourself, you can actually try to also maybe keep them on and say, hey, how about we do this? We'll keep you on. We won't buy your property from you, but we'll do a split. We will manage and run and operate what you need to do and bring it up higher too. And but this will be our equity and profit split, from there.
Hmm.
And so that's
Hmm.
something I feel like owners are definitely, especially nowadays, are keen to know because they don't want to deal with the management. They don't want to deal with the with a lot of that kind of stuff. And they, you know, instead of selling it for a big chunk, which they have to pay taxes for, it also incentivizes them to be able to get pretty much cash flow for their retirement,
Hmm. Hmm. And so
and that's a big one.
at this point you're at your second, commercial client that you bring on. This puts you at like 70 or so properties listings. You still went from 70 there to 150 plus. Was that just, more of those commercial clients coming in to the property management side of things? Like you never went back to
Exactly.
like one property at a
Exactly.
time, adding one property at a time?
No, well, we still have actually on board one, like, single family ones. We don't do it as much anymore. I actually just do that for as a favor to some people who kind of reach out to me personally. But we definitely the growth to the 74 to 103 has definitely directly to do with um, more of that type, like the commercial type
Hmm.
of owners and properties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you say that all of your clients have come from, of course, word of mouth, and there hasn't been any major marketing per
Mm-mm,
se on your end. So if
not at all.
someone's listening and is thinking, okay, I want to stop working with owners that just give me one property at a time. I want to bring my property management business, my co-hosting business, to a point where I can start working with some of these commercial investors where one
Right.
client represents multiple, listings. Where would you recommend someone starts? Because it's not as straightforward to find this contacts, right? This
Right.
owners that own commercial property. So how did you go about it, and also how do you recommend other people go about it?
The way I went about it was I was essentially sought out by those owners because of my brand awareness and also my networking. So I really made it a point to say, hey, this is my expertise. This is what I do. I've got a couple books out already. I was, one of the authors on Hospitable Hosts. Um, I was able also to write a piece in the Bigger Pockets Partnerships book. Um, and I've been on a couple of podcasts and interviews as well. And so that networking piece When it comes to also the Facebook forums, I have a big voice in those and in the industry. So I think that's one of the reasons why I was sought out. Now, for everyone else, I definitely recommend to still continue to bring that brand out and to continue to network and to let other people know what you do, what your strengths are. That's key, and that is important. Another avenue though would be to go ahead and talk directly with brokers in the area in the specific market that you want to um, um, kind of like build up your commercial co-hosting business. Go into those markets and get yourself in those circles, in those rooms with brokers, maybe even agents, sure, who are familiar with the market and have access and have relationships with people, right, who own those type of assets. Because those people with those big assets or big resorts, they definitely work with brokers to either buy them or sell them, refinance them, etc., etc. And so I would say get along with those brokers and also start from there. Now you can do
Hmm.
like cold calls as well. I mean, go on like Google and just search up these like type of properties on there. But trying to like contact them and getting their leads and everything is a whole other thing. So I would say start first with building your brand while you're doing that networking, and while you're working on networking, building your brand, start connecting with and forming those relationships with the brokers.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Now, let me ask you this. So the time of a CEO of any business is one of the most valuable resources that the business has.
100%.
And this is true if it's a CEO that, let's say, only dedicates his time or her time to this one business. I think it's even more true in the case of someone that, like you, also happens to have the W2 still, because to some degree every minute that you decide to spend on the business has to be worth it, because there's an opportunity cost to it on
Of
both
course.
sides. So I'm curious to know, like, when you're deciding, you know because you mentioned you focus a lot on the 20% of the activities that will get you the 80% of the outcomes. When you're thinking, what are the things that the 20% of the things that I can spend time on my property management business that I know will get me 80% of the output, what are the things that you spend time on these days as a CEO in the business?
Um, what I spent a lot of time on was focusing on our systems and SOPs and processes, because that will pretty much make or break your company, right? Um, but I also spent a lot of time on honing on our employees, like finding the right person to hire, finding the right manager to put in that position to lead the rest of your team, finding that operations manager. So a lot of my time in the beginning was spent on honing our systems, training, and making sure we find employees. Because part of the whole 80/20, part of the whole 4 hour work week, part of this whole thing and being able to juggle all this stuff is learning like what like you had briefly touched upon, learning what um tasks and items I can spend my time on, and the other 80% that doesn't require my time, and delegating that out and automating that out, and so forth. And so um I think by being able to really set up my automations and my systems and my employees, that's what allowed me, and that's what still allows me today to operate the way I do. Now, today in my company, I work on acquisitions, but eventually I will hire a COO who can help work on acquisitions on my behalf, you know? And so that's kind of also what you want to showcase this. Are you trying to build this? I have this property management company that has over 150 plus listings. Um, Someone can replace me. I can sell my business, right? Rather than having a business where I have to work on directly so much, or else it will fail, right? I want to be able to take this business. Hey, here's all. It's we're acquiring assets. It's running a day-to-day operations. It knows what to do. Here are the employees. Here's a business I can sell.
Hmm.
Here's a business that I can. And even if I don't end up selling, at all, um, the fact that you stand it up so that you could sell it makes your business that much stronger,
Hmm.
right? That much
Hmm.
more real as well. And so, um, hopefully that answers your questions as far as like trying to
Yeah,
map my time and whatnot. Yeah,
for sure. And I think, I talk about this a lot in the show, but like the concept of leverage, as defined by Naval Ravikant, he says there's four types of leverage, right? Leverage being how you can get more output per unit of time, right? So he goes
yeah,
into like,
yeah,
you have talent, right? You can hire people, which is one of the things you mentioned you spend time on. You have capital, which is, you can raise funds, right?
yeah.
You can raise debt. Then you have, of course, technology, code, automation, right? Which is another part
AI.
that you mentioned. And then the last one that they mention is that he mentions is content, which to some degree he puts SOPs in that category, right? Because if you record a certain process, whether that's written or actual video recorded, like that's something that you do once, and like
Right,
it can be repeated many times. And then you've also built your brand, right? Which is
right.
also part of leverage. You do it once, you hop on a podcast once, you write a book once, and then there's unlimited times that can be read, and so that's
That's right.
that's pretty that's pretty interesting in terms of how you approach that. Now, when you say you oversee acquisitions right now, are you talking exclusively acquisitions when you guys buy property per se, or you mean like acquisitions as in like also the signing of new management contracts?
All of the above. So buying properties, new management contracts, buying property management companies. Where we just went through a session where I looked into buying a property management company last week. So did some due diligence and everything. That one didn't work out because it didn't pencil out to how I wanted it to be. However, that's currently what acquisitions is
Hmm.
for.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you look at buying an asset, let's start with an asset, right? Whether that's a hotel, property, what do you look at differently now versus when you first started, based on what you know now, in terms of the underwriting, the
Yeah.
markets,
Yeah.
what's different in your current approach?
Man, I didn't know anything when I was first looking into it. So everything now is what I look at. But I would say definitely looking at the size of the size of the property, and the size of the company. And what I mean by that is like, okay, how much revenue are they bringing in? Because you have property management companies that has anywhere from 5 to like 20 contracts, right, or properties under the property management company. But if they're not making more than like 250 in net revenue, then the best way to treat that type of company to buy out is not by NOI and cap rate. It's actually the underlying, because they don't make enough, to buy it based off of that. At that point, you're just buying it based off of the contract itself.
Yeah.
So the asset is the contract. I don't want to buy your company based off of how much it's producing, because that could essentially be completely controlled by you, right? And so for that small tight knit type of company, we're looking at buying out their contracts if anything, and that has a multiple of maybe 1 to 1.5, right? And depending how good it is, maybe I'd be willing to go up to like 1.75, but like that's really has a multiple of 1 and 1.5. But if your bidder is like above 250, then that's when you want to start looking into, okay, then maybe you're looking at maybe a 2, or 2.5 up to 3, and then making a million, you're looking at like maybe like 5 or 6, 7 or 8 even, and to bring it from 1 to 2 million, maybe you're looking at 7, 8, 9, and 10, right? Multiple. And so I would say there's a big difference between those two. That's as far as buying property management companies. I really look into like the size of the company. You look at their monthly P&Ls as well, and kind of see like, okay, well, how much are they actually producing and providing? You know, because I have my operations already all set up. I can acquire something and tell my team take it. They know what to do to get it up and running already. whether I give them one or if I give them 70, right? So they know so that's honing the process too, right? They know what to do to get it all up and running and live and everything. So that's really the biggest takeaway there is in the acquisitions part is just making sure I do my own due diligence and running the numbers and making sure that that's the P&Ls and everything are in order.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and understanding what are you actually interested in buying? You know, are you interested in buying the contracts, the actual real estate, the actual business with the people and whatnot, or not? Right. I think that's also crucial. So, Vincent, when you look ahead, do you think there's a point at which you're going to need to decide, to go full time into this, or do you think that for you, continuing to do the W2 is something that because you enjoy and you're being able to build the infrastructure on the business side so well, like you don't see a need for, ever letting go of that W2? Like, do you see the continuing the W2 as as well as the business as something temporary, or is just kind of the way you want to operate even moving forward?
I think eventually, I think when the time I spend on my W-2 starts making me lose money, then that's when I'll probably stop. You know, um, and at this moment in time, and that, and also if I don't like what I'm doing at my work, in terms of like I don't like the people as well, then that's when I'll probably step away and get into this stuff full time. But other than that, I mean, like it's definitely manageable. It's great, and if any of my W-2 coworkers are listening, I love you guys. So
Right, right, right. No, for sure, for sure. I mean, it's not to say that it can't be done. It's just, at some point is understanding, yeah, what's the trade-off, right? So
right.
it's good that you've been able to make it work. What's next for you, Vinci? So you're at 150 listings now. You've seen very rapid growth. You say you're focusing on acquisitions, buying property management companies. Like, how do you operate in terms of keeping you motivated? Do you set yourself a goal? Is it just like, we want to be at a certain number of properties? Is it a revenue goal? Is it just let's do our best, one day at a time type of mindset? Like, how do you stay on track, and what's your vision of where you want to take the business to at this point?
Yeah, I definitely want to like as far as Getaway House, I definitely want to take that business to a point where we could sell it. Right.
Hmm.
When it comes to like at what price point or revenue, whatever, that's something that I'm kind of like trying to envision and work on still right now. But I am trying to position it so that we could sell it if we wanted to, and that
And you want to
itself is
sell
already a
the
lot of
real
work.
estate, or you want to sell the management,
The business,
uh
the
the
business,
business, the
the
business?
business, which is
But
the management of the
yeah.
all that, and I could keep my real estate if I wanted to. But regardless, the sale of the business itself is the
Hmm.
key. And so building up my business to a point where it's sellable, is that a word? Um, is kind of the goal plan right now in the moment at the moment in time.
And what's
Yeah.
missing for your business to be sellable?
I would say definitely, time, time, time to showcase that, like, a lot of this, like going up to 153, that was just this year, and so like, um, showcasing time and showcasing history that hey, we've been able to sustain this, we've been able to grow, we've been able to have a business that is actually compounding and everything. So it's just time, really. I mean, for
Hmm.
the past 3 years, we've pretty much grown almost 5x each year, you know? And so being able to showcase that and continue with growth over time is really just the missing factor because we will grow, you know? We just want to make sure that, like, over time, it stays consistent. Revenue and profits also stay consistent or also grow as we're growing as well. And then and having that is key to being able to sell the business.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So in terms of number of properties and number of listings, would you say you're comfortable where you are? You don't want to add more, or are you? Well, I mean, you're looking to acquire, so naturally you do want to add more. Is there a goal
I
you set
mean,
for yourself as far as
some
that
drop.
goes, or?
No, not really. Some drop and some come in new. So the thought process is just to have it consistently growing. You know what that looks like, maybe 1, 2, 3% average per year. That's fine with us, but it's just to showcase that, hey, we're continuing to grow even if people fall off. New leads are being made, and then we're acquiring more. That's the biggest part of really having a full cycle business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And in terms of your personal life, just like in terms of how you stay motivated, because I'm sure like it sounds nice to be able to delegate and automate and still do, the W-2 while the business builds itself. But the reality
Right.
is that it's not easy, right? It's not easy.
Ah.
There's
No,
problems, there's
no, no,
challenges,
no.
and then there's the nights you go to bed and think you're gonna be able to sleep, and then there's the kids and like, you know what I mean? Like, so how do you stay yourself how do you keep yourself afloat? How do you keep yourself motivated? Like, how do you keep yourself from just throwing the towel? Like, or is it just not something that ever crosses your mind? Like, what's worked for you in terms of not losing it in the midst of all this chaos and craziness that I'm sure you must be going through?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to business and money, man, um, the way I see it, all that can be gone in an instant, right? In a
Hmm.
snap, right? And so I'm not placed on this earth to keep any of that. When I die, I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to keep any of that stuff, right? It's really just being able to like leave a lasting impact to my kids, my kids' kids, and other people, right? But what keeps me motivated, honestly, is also the way you want to really think about money and think about like this business and whatnot. Um, I don't own any of it. I don't get to keep it when I die. I don't get to do any of that stuff. It's God's wealth. It's God's money. You know, and I'm just a manager. I'm just the gatekeeper. I'm just the one who's managing God's money. And I'm going to tell my kids that too. Like, hey, this is not your money. We don't own this money. This is all up to the Lord, up to God. I'm a Christian man, and so this is something that holds true in our family, our values, and so we live it up all up to God, and we're just stewards of His money. And so
Hmm.
as stewards of His money, we're here to just grow it and utilize it to help other people. You know, and so that's what we will continue to do. We'll
The,
continue to
does
utilize
it ever
this, and
happen? Does it ever
yeah.
happen that you feel overwhelmed with all the things you have going on at the same time? The job, the business, the kids, the
Oh yeah,
acquisitions.
I mean, there's times where there's bad days, right, and good days.
And how do you get
I feel
yourself
like
through that? Is it your spirituality and your belief that
yeah,
puts you back on track? Is it like do you think about the kids? Like what puts you back on
yeah,
track in those hard days?
knowing that like, hey, it's not on my shoulders. Like I'll leave it up to God.
Hmm.
I will do everything I can in order to like make it work one way or that way. But no matter what, like I don't have to worry enough so much because God will take care of us. He will take care of it. But that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you're lazy, right? Doesn't mean that you're just like, hey, let him take care of this because you know what? Not my problem anymore. That's not what it is, right? What it is like, are you using your time and education, your resources, and your network and everything in order to in order to expand or grow or to solve this issue or whatever. But mentally, knowing that like that's a huge shoulder, like, hey, you know what? God's gonna take care of my family. We're gonna be fine. Things
Hmm.
happen, things break, things stuff. So mentally, that's how I'm able to kind of like look at things. Now there are times when
Yeah.
I'm tired, and sometimes you just need a rest, you need a reset. Um, and that's another thing too. Going for a walk, going swimming. I love doing that. And we go to our backyard. We just moved to a new spot a couple months ago, and so we have a pool. So just like submerging myself down there is just like and going for a swim is really therapeutic, man. Yeah.
Yeah, nice, nice. Yeah, no, and I love what you said there about like making sure you do what you can do, and then the rest understanding that there's things you cannot control, right? And I think they call it the circle of influence, right? Where you, if you focus on your circle of influence, the things you
Yeah,
can do something about, your life
exactly.
is so much better because there's so much that can there's so much that you don't control, like in this business and any business. And if you spend time on that, all you're gonna do is you're gonna be miserable because you're gonna be focusing on things that even if you tried your best, you couldn't fix. Versus, hey, I'm doing my best one day at a time, focusing on inputs and trusting that the outputs, will take care of themselves. I think
Exactly.
that's very wise. All right, Vinci, sounds good, man. Well, listen, this has been very insightful. I've enjoyed the conversation. I could keep you here for 2 more hours. Believe me, I could. Don't let me do that, otherwise I will. But
All
no,
good.
jokes aside, this has been very fun. Any final words of wisdom you might want to share, or just letting people know where they might be able to connect with you online, and follow the journey.
Yeah, man. People connect with me. Anywhere on social media, it's at Vinci underscore Sevilla underscore Junior. On all socials. And one last word and piece of advice for your audience is: a lot of people think knowledge is power, and I don't believe that. I don't believe knowledge is power. I believe um, action with knowledge is power. So you got to act upon the knowledge that you end up learning, but without acting upon it, you can't really do anything about it. And so, um, make sure to take action.
Hmm. Yeah, someone that knows way less but does a lot more will get much further than someone that knows a lot more but just relies on that knowledge to
Exactly.
get them up in life. Yeah, love it, man. Thanks so much for the time and really appreciate it. And looking forward to catching up soon.
Sounds good.
Take care.
Take it easy.